Real men, manly man. What exactly are we talking about? Manly is a classic term of approval, suggested traits admired by society, such as determination, decisiveness, courage, and strength. Popular culture associates manliness with things like hot rods, steak, football, and chest hair, while conversely prohibiting things like hand lotion, tanning beds, minivans, and aerobics. Well, I contend that real men, manly men, live boldly, speak truthfully, and lead reliably. And for those who don't, well, you know what time it is. It's time to man up.
Fun. The last couple of weeks have been fun talking about things and pretty much just making fun of us guys. But there is a lot of truth to the idea of what biblical masculinity is, that we don't spend a lot of time talking about that. And so just to catch you up, if you're here for the first time and this is the end of the movie and you're walking in and you're wondering why the dinosaurs are all dead, that's a Jurassic World reference. I don't know if anybody got that. Okay, I don't go to the movies. So good couple. But what we've been talking about is what that just said, that real men, biblical men, do three things. Well, they do more than that, but the three things we're focusing on in this series is to live boldly. And last week we talked about speaking truthfully, and today we're going to talk about lead reliably. And I did promise you guys a present. We got the ladies' roses, and so I'm really excited to unveil that there are two green buckets that you guys, if you're a dad, you get to come and you get to get one of these limited edition GCC koozies. Isn't that great? Isn't that fun? Okay. So this is a reminder, whatever you're drinking, Jesus is watching you. I'm just kidding. I'm sort of just kidding. I don't know how a wine bottle would fit in that. That's not going to work. But, he drank that. But you guys can pick these up on your way out. You can pick one up, just a little gift to say thank you. And I do want to say that there are a lot of women who kind of handle both roles. And that's tough. There's more and more and more in our society today that the dad has been absent for whatever reason, whether it's a military family and he's off serving, or the dad has died, or the dad just happens to not be involved in the family life. So to you women who have been celebrated for Mother's Day, but there isn't another person to handle the fatherly responsibilities, we want to say in a weird, strange way, Happy Father's Day to you as well. And as a fammy in my home, I can understand that a lot. My wife working and being pregnant, and there's been a lot of roles, a lot of things for me to do that I normally don't. You do it all, and I don't have to do it all, and that's amazing. So thank you, ladies who handle those fatherly responsibilities. You are an absolute godsend. So happy Father's Day to you as well. And just for a few moments, I wanted to share with you what God has been doing in my life over the last week. I went with our students to camp, and I'm from Charleston. I grew up in Charleston, so that hit me pretty hard. Just the whole thing, and then to see the response of what has happened after that has been so much more powerful in a positive way. To see churches unite. And as a matter of fact, several church plants that I know, friends of mine, they've canceled their services this morning, and they've encouraged their congregations to go to Marion Square this morning, where they're having service right now. Citywide worship and prayer service together. And ABC News is streaming it right now, which I think is incredible to see that happen. There was another tragedy that kind of happened closer to home for the Student Life family and South Carolina. We were there, just so you know, our group of 15 students and 3 adults was there. We were there with about 1,200 other people from all over the place. There was actually a group from Anchorage, Alaska. How would you like that bus ride? Anchorage, Alaska. There were lots of churches from South Carolina. One particular church was from Irmo, South Carolina. And if you saw my tweet earlier this week asking for prayer for this church, here's why. There was a student there on Monday who, for whatever reason, had an asthma attack. It got pretty bad, so they sent him home. It turned into an infection of some kind. They took him to the ICU. And so Tuesday night, we had this meeting, and the youth leaders were praying for this young man named Owen. And then we received word that he passed away. And he was one of 4 quadruplets that were on the trip. And so that church group went home that night with the loss of that young man. And I mean, I don't know. I don't know if it was the fact that my child was there this time. This is the first trip for Savannah Grace and for so many of our other sixth graders. But that my kid was in that room, and just like her, he was another kid sitting in that room on Monday, standing up, jumping and singing on Monday, listening to the message on Monday, playing on the beach on Monday. And the fact that by the end of the week he was in the presence of Jesus, it just floored me. And so I was talking about it with our guys in our room. We were having some small group time, and I think it was Sam Gustin who said it first. He said, all I can think about is that the rest of these kids' lives, when you see a twins, the first thing you say is, hey, you guys are twins, as if they don't know that they're twins. And these kids are going to walk around and they're going to say, hey, y'all are triplets. And in their hearts and minds, they're thinking, no, we're not. And I thought that was incredibly mature and thoughtful and compassionate thought to have. And it just weighed on me all week. And between that and Charleston, I could not wait to be with my family. I could not wait to be with my church family, just to worship our God, who in the midst of pain and difficulty, in the midst of what seems like darkness, we can celebrate a God who has not been overcome. A God who does know the end game and has triumphed over it all. And while we grieve and we hurt for these families, and we grieve and we hurt for this particular family in Columbia area, we trust and we know that these people are having a far better Sunday than any of us are. And so as we kind of wrap this series up and we think about leadership and what it means to be a man and lead, there are a lot of reasons that we would take a back seat, that maybe we've been lazy to take leadership, or we've been passive to take leadership. And I will tell you right now that in light of the things that I've experienced this week, in the light of things that I've seen, we can no longer be passive, gentlemen. We can no longer fear leadership. God picked us for whatever reason. He picked us to be the leaders. And it's time we pick up that baton and stand firm. And so we're going to talk about what that looks like. Because leadership is not just being the best looking, tallest, most educated, richest person in the room. It's not even being the most influential and powerful person in the room. It's far more than that. But for whatever reason, most men fail to take leadership, not because of an ability that they lack, but because of an insecurity that they have. Most men fail to lead, not because of ability, but because of insecurity. And I can speak with full authority on insecurity. Growing up as a acne-riddled, very short, puffy 70s hair in the 90s kid in high school, insecurity was my first, middle, and last name. And I hid my insecurity behind a very boisterous, happy-go-lucky personality. Because if that was my personality, then everything would bounce off a little easier. And so I was very insecure. I continue to be very insecure. And what I've decided to define insecurity is, lots of people define it different ways. Not liking something about yourself or whatever. But here's really, in terms of leadership, in terms of men, here's what insecurity can be defined as. A fear of future rejection based on past failure. That's what insecurity is with leadership. A fear of future rejection based on past failure. We've all failed, every single one of us, men, women alike. We've got something in our past that we wish we'd have done different, that we wish would have figured out differently, or it had gone differently. And so we all have failure. And some of us, we no longer take a step forward. We're no longer willing to carry the mantle of leadership because we're afraid, based on our failure in the past, that we're going to be rejected in the future. That's what the insecurity is with leadership. But here's the thing about fear and God's economy and what biblical masculinity calls us to do as men, is that fearlessness has never been a prerequisite for leadership in God's economy. He has never looked across the world of his creation and the man after man and looked for one who is fearless. It's never been something he asks of us. But that's what we think. We think our generals have to be Fearless. We think our pastors have to be fearless, and I will tell you right now, your pastor is not fearless. I'm terrified. We think our dads are supposed to be fearless, and sometimes we think our dads are fearless. But if we were to be honest with our children, with our spouses, with our friends, we would all admit to a great deal of fear residing in our hearts. Fear that anyone could walk through these doors anytime and do what happened in Charleston. Fear that our children are not going to be given the opportunity to breathe air tomorrow. Fear that the deep, dark secrets in our hearts of how deplorable we really are and how miserable at following Christ we are will be found out. But it's great news that fearlessness has never been a prerequisite for leadership. And so what I want you to do is I want you to get your Bible out and I want you to turn to Joshua. Joshua chapter 1. It's in the Old Testament. It's near the beginning of the Old Testament. It's one of the first 10 books in there. And just as you turn there, I'll give you a little backstory. You've probably heard of a guy named Moses. Moses was one of the most important leaders of the Old Testament. And God used him despite his speech impediment, despite his fear, despite his unwillingness to lead. God used Moses and his brother Aaron to lead the people of Israel out of slavery and to the promised land, back to Israel. And there is this incredible moment of transition of leadership we find in Joshua chapter 1. Moses has gone as far as God is going to allow Moses to go, and God is about to bury Moses. And in case you didn't realize that's what happened, it's a weird little place in Scripture that Moses goes up on a mountain and God buries him. And my mental image is the finger of God just pushes him straight down into the ground, which is a little twisted and weird, but that's just how I read the Bible. Okay, so Moses dies, God buries Moses, and Joshua has been Moses' assistant, his number 2 guy for years and years and years. If you are familiar with the Exodus, the story of the people of God in the wilderness, they were getting closer and closer to the promised land, and they decided to send these spies in to check out the land, to check out the people, and there were 10 spies, and they came back, and most of them said, the people are giants. We can't go in. They're going to slaughter us. It's not going to work. And there was Joshua and Caleb who came back and said, are you all crazy? Do you not understand what God has done for us? Have you seen what he's brought us from, what he's brought us through? Of course we can go in. We need to go in now, and God's going to take care of it. He's promised that to us. We need to trust God. And because of Joshua and Caleb's confidence in God and their willingness to trust God, through 40 years in the wilderness, they're the only 2 from their generation who survived. And so here's Joshua taking over after tremendous leadership of Moses. And we look in chapter 1, verse 6, at what God says to Joshua. He says this, be strong and courageous, for you shall cause this people to inherit the land that I swore to their fathers to give them. Remember, this is a promise that Joshua knew full well. This is a promise that he had believed for years and years and years, and now 40-something years later, it's time, and he's the guy that's going to lead them in. And so God doesn't say, be fearless. God says, be strong and courageous, and then remember the promise that I've made. God's call to this new leader is to be courageous. And here's a beautiful definition of courage. If you've never heard this, this is a quote by Nelson Mandela. He says this, that courage is not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. A courageous man isn't someone who moves forward because he's not afraid of what's in front of him or not afraid of what he can't see. A courageous man, according to God, as he's talking to Joshua, is one who is fearful and moves forward anyway. I mean, isn't that what parenting is all about? I mean, it's terrifying. You remember that first time you had to hold the baby? Like holding other people's baby, whatever, but it's yours and like you're responsible for it. Changing that diaper and not knowing how to make the transition from the dirty to the clean without the onesie getting covered in the dirty. And how about this, when the first time you're all sick? That was probably the most miserable experience of parenthood, when you're all sick. Like if one of you's well, it's cool because they can take care of things. But I remember when we had Savannah Grace and the first time that Anita really, if Anita's sick, we're all miserable. It's because it's just we can't take care of ourselves without her. Okay, let's just be honest right there. But the first time all three of us were sick, like nobody, like she would just cry, and we felt bad because we were sick, and we were like all making each other more sick. As soon as one person felt better, the virus or whatever got back around and was just doing, donuts in our health worlds. That's awful. It's terrifying. And you're like, how in the world can I be a parent? There's so much that I can't do. Well, parenthood is all about courage. Let's back it up. How about, gentlemen, when we asked her to marry us? Like, we're kind of sure she's going to say yes, but I don't know. I mean, there's always that we've seen enough YouTube videos now that I don't know why anybody does a public, proposal. Have you seen the one where the girl takes the mariachi guitar and hits the guy in the head in a mall? If you haven't seen that one, that's your afternoon entertainment. Okay, just go and search bad proposals on YouTube. It'll make you feel good about yourself, honestly. So if you need some self-esteem, there you go. That's my encouragement to you today. But there's fear in that. There's fear in marriage. There's fear in every single part of what we do in life. How about being a believer in a world that says believers are crazy? How about trusting that a guy who lived 2,000 years ago that you and I have never physically met died on a cross, was buried in a tomb, and then somehow, miraculously came back to life, and we're going to stand up in front of people and say, I believe that's true. That takes courage. Fearing what people are going to say about us. Fearing what people are going to say about our marriage. Fearing about what people are going to say about our parenting. Our lack of parenting. Our choices in career. Wardrobe. There's plenty to be afraid of. But God's call to us is to be courageous, not fearless. It's not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. So when it comes to leading reliably, what really does that entail? And for the sake of our conversation today, we're just going to talk about two things that come with leading reliably. And that's this. It's tasks and relationships. With every leadership opportunity that you and I have, there are always tasks to be done, things to lead a group through, but then there's also relationships in the midst of those tasks. And that's something that I honestly kind of struggled with for a long time, because I kind of get tunnel vision. And if I had planted this church maybe 10 years ago, none of you would be here, because I was just brutal. I would just run over people like, God called me to do this, we're going to do it, dadgummit, get on board or get out of the way. That was kind of just, I was brash and dumb and young, and like we all are at that age, but I was even worse because I thought Jesus was telling me to do something, right? Okay? And so when it comes to the tasks that God gives us, I had a pastor tell me this one time. He sat me down and he said, Philip, God is never going to call you to accomplish something that requires you to run over his people in the process. He's never going to call us to accomplish something that requires us to run over his people in the process. So when it comes to leading, gentlemen, yes, we got to get the job done. And we understand that. We want to get the job done. Well, anything that doesn't require work in our home, that we can let go for like ages, right? That spice rack's never going to get finished, Bill Cosby, right? Okay? Some of you are old enough to remember that running joke on the Cosby Show. The spice rack in the kitchen, it just never got done. All right? The deck, whatever it is, fill in the gap. There's something at home that we have no problem letting just continue on forever. No, I'm going to get it. I saw this T-shirt. It said, I'm going to butcher it, but it was something like this. Ladies, if your man says he's going to get a job done, he's going to get the job done. There's no need to nag him every 6 months about it. And I thought, yeah, that's pretty accurate. That's funny because it's true. But we have this thing in us that we want to get done, and I'm pretty much, I'm terrible at it. I used to ask this question when we were doing interviews. I'd ask people, are you A, B, or C? Are you a person who would go to a store and buy an entertainment center, which we don't do that anymore, shows you dated things there. Okay, buy an entertainment center. Are you going to A, put it together that night, B, put part of it together that night, it gets late, you wait until the next morning to finish it, or C, just wait and put it all together tomorrow? The correct answer, if you're wondering, is A. You put it all together that night. Type A people, understand? Okay? That's who I am. So the task, whatever I'm given, I want to get it done. I want everything else to stop until the job is done. I have tunnel vision in that way. But a lot of times, there are people involved that are not exactly like me. They're called wrong. Not really. But I've learned that there are people that aren't like me, and that's the relationships part. And so Jeff Henderson, who's a pastor in Atlanta, Georgia, he did a series called Climate Change that we may just watch one time as a church because it's that good. And here's the illustration he gave. And we're a river lake community here, sort of. I think that's a river or a lake out there. I think there's some actual water in there. But some of you like to ski. How many of you like to ski or kneeboard or wakeboard or whatever? Okay, lots of you. Awesome. Okay, but here's the thing. When you have a boat, there's the water behind the boat. What's that called? The wake, right? Shows you how much I ski. Okay, there are two things that happen behind a boat when you're participating with people. Okay, there's the people who are on the skis or on the board or whatever, and they're having a blast, right? They're the people that you kind of get sick of because they're like doing flips and stuff, and they never fall over, and you're like, I'm never going to do this in front of you, ever, right? Okay, so there's those people, and then there's people like you and I who we try to get up, and then we fall down, and then we forget that our hands are death gripped onto this rope, and we're just going through the wake, half underwater, half over water. Okay, so there's two options to this situation. You're either having fun, enjoying yourself, or you're drowning. There is no in between. Okay, there's no give and take. There's no fence riding here. You're either close to Jesus or you feel like you're dancing with Jesus. I guess walking on water is closest we'll get. Okay, that's it. And what Jeff said here is that in our lives, that we all have a wake. That there are people that walk through our lives and they're experiencing our wake, and they're doing one of two things. They're either blessed by their experience with us, and they're like the guy on the skis that's doing flips and stuff, and they're enjoying their life because they were a part of yours. Or there are people who interact in our lives and they're drowning because of it. Because of our attitude toward them, because of our attitude toward life. And that's the relationship part of this leading reliably. Whether it's your children, your family members, your friends, your coworkers, your neighbors. We all need to remember that as we lead, that there are relationships in the balance. That sometimes the task has to be paused for the sake of the relationship. Sometimes the opposite is true. That we need to have a conversation about a relationship so that we can accomplish what God's called us to accomplish. Sometimes we've got to put our preferences and our feelings on hold to understand that we're called to do something together. But leading reliably always incorporates these two aspects. The task that God calls us to and the relationship with the people that He's included us in. There's this amazing scene in a terrible movie, and you can watch it if you want to. It's called Battle Los Angeles. Anybody seen Battle Los Angeles? Okay, a couple of people. It's like aliens invade LA, and we'd all be honest, we'd be okay with that if they just destroyed LA. My friends moved out, so we're good. Okay, but it's this sci-fi movie, and it's done by Americans, which means it wasn't done great. For some reason, Australians always do a better job with the sci-fi movies. And so there's this sergeant who had kind of retired, was called back into duty because the aliens are killing everybody, and he's this decorated staff sergeant, and he's put under the command of this fresh lieutenant, brand new lieutenant. And they're going through this, and they're experiencing this whole new battle, and they don't know what to do, and this lieutenant kind of freaks out, and he goes off by himself to kind of whine and pine because he doesn't know what to do. And the staff sergeant comes in, and I just remember this because I've served under leaders like this, not brand new or anything, but the indecision of a leader can destroy a relationship. And that's what was going on with this lieutenant. He was terrified, and he couldn't make a decision. And what happens when you're not a decisive leader is that you lose followers, whether by them leaving you or potentially being burned and hurt That as leaders, we need to remember that we are stewards of the people that God has placed under our leadership. The word shepherd is used for a reason, that the shepherd cares for the flock. The shepherd protects the flock. And the shepherd leads the flock. The sheep know the shepherd's voice. And so in this scene, this staff sergeant comes in. Remember, he's not in command, but he comes at this lieutenant. And the lieutenant's freaking out because all these guys had died and he didn't want to know what to do. And he says, you just need to tell us to go somewhere. You tell us to go left, we go left. Tell us to go right, we'll go left. But you just need to make a decision. We're with you. And that just resonated with me as a husband, as a father, as a friend, as a pastor. Because there are times that I'm not absolutely sure what we should do. I'm not completely confident what the best answer is or what the best path is. But if I am listening to my Savior, if I'm spending time in communion with Him, then I've got to make a decision and trust that He's got His hand on my life. And if it doesn't go well, it doesn't go well, and we move on. Because that's what courage is, right? In the face of fear, in the face of failure, we move forward. That's leading reliably. We can look at Paul in the New Testament. This is a great verse. I just want to share. You don't have to turn there. It's in 1 Corinthians. We're going to throw this on the screen. Look at what Paul says. In 1 Corinthians 16, he says, be watchful, stand firm in the faith, act like men. Be strong. Let all that you do be done in love. Now, guys, as we think about being men, we don't think about act like men and everything we do being done in love. Those two don't seem to match up in our culture, do they? But that's what a real man does. A real man leads not from a place of strength or intelligence, but from a heart of love. Because we care about the people that we're leading. We care about those children, those spouses, those co-workers. We love. 1 John says we love because He first loved us. So for all of us that have been concerned about failure as leaders, for all of us who have been pretty bad husbands and bad fathers up to this point, and listen, I'm the chief of us. For the first 7 or 8 years, I didn't lead my wife very well at all. I still struggle with it. But I was so passive. I didn't pray with her. We didn't read the Bible together. It was awkward and weird, and I didn't feel like I had any integrity to do so. But when it comes to leading reliably and doing it in the future, it's all the same. You still have to take the first step. And if you love the people in your life, men, if you love the people that God's put in your life, then just whatever you do in love. Act like men. Accomplish the task. Care for the relationship. And then look what Joshua is told. We're going to go back to Joshua chapter 1. The very end, not the very end, but this is what he says in verse 9. This is God. Have I not commanded you, be strong and courageous? Do not be frightened and do not be dismayed. For the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. If you're having to make a decision financially, pray. Ask God for help. Make a decision and trust that He's with you. If you're struggling in your marriage, you're not sure what to do or how to talk to them and how to get past this issue, just go and say, I love you. Apologize because you've done something wrong. We all have. Own your side of the fence. That's the task you need to accomplish to repair the relationship. That's what leading reliably is. I know this is a lot. Gentlemen, I know it's intimidating. And I'm the first of us to say, I don't feel like I have what it takes to be the man God desires. And that's why we do this series. Not so that you'll be the epic, perfect father, husband, friend, brother, but so that we can all start taking steps to be the men we were created to be. And this is how we're going to start. We're going to live boldly. We're going to speak truthfully. And we're going to lead reliably. We're going to fail. We're going to be afraid. But God says, be strong and courageous, not because of what you have, but because of who I am. Be strong and courageous. Act like men. Trust that I am with you. In spite of fear, in the face of fear, in the face of failure, in the face of rejection, act like men, for I am with you. I really honestly believe this. This is not just preacher talk. That if you and I will step up as men, we will see our homes change. And listen, it's not stepping up and putting the foot down and leading with an iron fist. It's leading with love, accomplishing the tasks, and stewarding the relationships. And if our families change, our city will change.